Well, this is a special episode of Fancy Ramen Podcast, episode 115, a Sekiro Spoilercast. I'm Neil.
Oh, I have to introduce myself, don't I?
You just have to say I'm
Tiffany.
And I'm Scott. And today we've replaced Cookie with Tiffany as a fellow Sekiro expert for the podcast while I think he's enjoying his Easter holiday.
Oh yeah, it's Easter.
Yeah, happy Easter, everyone who celebrates Easter, and happy Sunday for everyone who don't. I think it's also Passover too, so happy Passover, or joyous Passover to anyone who is doing that.
A vibrant Passover.
Yeah, a fecund Passover.
Revitalizing Passover.
A dandy Passover.
Let's just get right into Sekiro, though. I initially had thoughts about how we could carry out this discussion, but I don't know if it's really pertinent to actually talk or summarize the plot or anything to that extent. If you haven't played the game, you should probably go play it, or if you don't play it, you can watch it, of course. But we're going to spoil the bejeebus out of this game.
Oh yeah. And luckily it is probably the easiest From Software game to follow if you were to just watch videos of it or play the game once through and not pay attention to details, because it at least halfway tells you what's going on at all points in time.
You say that, and then part of me, though, also wants to note that because it's so straightforward, it gives you more reason to question everything.
It's also a lot deeper than it appears to be, or just presents itself.
I completely agree with that point. It really does have a surface narrative, and then all of these things kind of swimming deeper below that if you've played the other From Software games, you're already kind of instinctively analyzing or thinking about as you progress. Yeah, I'd have to agree. But if it's a first-time player who saw Activision on there instead of From Software and thought, oh, hey, I like Call of Duty, they may in fact find it at least a little bit easier to follow than, say, the narrative that exists within Bloodborne or the Dark Souls series.
I do have to point out, and I think I only feel the need to point this out because Cookie in the past has talked about this, this is published by Activision, but it's only being published by Activision in America. So the actual level of effect or impact they had on the game is likely minuscule to none.
Did you already mention that they also didn't even do much with the game?
Activision?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that's what I'm assuming.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know if you already mentioned that it didn't even touch the game much. They only touched the tutorial. That was it.
Oh, okay, that's interesting, the tutorial aspect of it. Well, they do a kind of crappy job.
It's not a great tutorial.
Yeah, I think if the game had maybe told the player at any point in time that the guard button is the button you should be using 90% of the game, I think that would probably have changed a lot of people's experiences with Sekiro.
I would also posit that this makes me wonder if Activision was just like, hey, let's add Hanbei the Undying so people can practice the combat if they need to. And From Software was like, okay, fantastic. We can make Hanbei have this secret backstory, and, and you can have a small side quest with him that is, I guess, the least esoteric out of all of the side quests that exist in this game.
It's weird because I feel like that has such an unsatisfying payoff. I mean, it's satisfying only within the regard of how much time you devoted to beating up the undying tutorial soldier. If you spend a shit ton of time with them, then it feels more meaningful.
If you practiced each move once, and then it's kind of like, hey, yeah, I've had you just stand in this this little circled opening for about 20 hours now and haven't done anything about it. And also haven't visited the offering box because I still don't know how it works.
Oh, did neither of you guys get anything in the offering box?
I did
Nothing.
not.
Okay, I was the only one then.
So who did you have to kill? I'm assuming that's what it was. You had to kill someone to...
No.
Care to explain?
Did you guys buy everything from Black Hat Badger?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, then that was it. I didn't buy everything from him because fuck the move he was selling, and you get. Did you guys finish his quest line?
I
You did not. I watched
did
you
not.
play. Okay.
I had a mistake in which I cured the dragon rot before I actually did anything. Like I saw that he was suffocating in an area near Senpu Temple on Mount Congo. And so I went and cured the dragon rot immediately before I did anything else. And when I went back, he wasn't there. And so I don't know, like maybe interacting with him immediately caused his quest to fail. So I know generally what's supposed to happen, but I wasn't able to get it to work.
Okay, so let's talk about, since this is a spoiler cast, let's talk about Black Hat Badger for a second. Just so I make sure too that like I'm following along with what you did with him to a T. So Black Hat Badger is a dwarf shinobi that you find in the old grave. You go, and if I'm assuming the trigger is if you buy enough shit from him, if not everything. I don't really know the details, nor have I explored it too much. He gives you the flag, or you essentially trigger the flag that is, he has enough money to figure things out and to escape Ashina Castle.
Mm-hmm.
He escapes to the Senpo Temple, and then where he waits essentially until you get the shinobi kite to fly across the ravine. Then he will end up at the Sunken Valley cave, I think, for Senpo Temple.
Yes.
Where he is at his son's grave.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the end of my experience with him because I just continued to talk to him. I'd go back there every once in a while, talk to him. He would, or see he was still there despite saying, maybe I should go back to Ashina Castle now. But he never did for mine.
He'll go back towards the end of the game. I just don't think you had looked for him. But he ends up dying towards the end anyway. He his quest line ends with him saving a child because the invaders,
his emotions got
are
the
trying
better
to
of him or something. Yeah.
kill a child, and he saves it. And then you pick up something off his dead body.
What do you pick up?
One of the balloons, but it's a balloon that gives you all the stats.
Is it reusable?
I don't think so. I don't know though.
Fuck. That I'm already kicking myself in the butt multiple times for immediately starting a second playthrough. Because I also lost access to all of the unique items. And the items with all of the lore and so forth. So when I wanted to go back and check a few things on some theories, it's well, I can't because I don't have those items anymore.
Good thing wiki exists.
I was going to say you could definitely use one of the wikis. The Mibu pilgrimage balloon is the one that you pick up from Badger, and it gives all of the balloon stats. So it's the increased wealth, the increased is it spirit?
Yeah.
What are the little paper spirit icons actually
the
called?
emblems.
Spirit emblems, yeah. Spirit emblems, you get you get resurrective power back in a greater degree. It increases all of it, and it's like a little rainbow pinwheel within the balloon.
Is it reusable?
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
it's a one-time use. And the last part of its item description is, on it is crudely scrawled to Tenkichi from Badger. So it was a balloon for his son, I imagine, that he was going to
That's sad.
give to his grave. Yeah, it's really sad. So's that aerial counter move that I don't think I ever used once.
Yeah, I don't think I used it either.
You can use it on the chickens or the roosters, but that's about it. And I've seen it used. I just haven't personally executed it because those roosters never get a chance to go airborne against me.
Hold up, can you use that against the Nightjar Shinobi when they're diving towards you?
You mean when they're going?
Are you talking about the ones coming off the kites?
Yeah.
Oh, that's my favorite surprise moment in the game as far as ambushes go.
Not the suicide bomber one.
Which is shortly after that.
The suicide bomber one only happened to me once, and I wasn't exactly sure what happened because I was fighting multiples, and all of a sudden everybody exploded. So I realized that there was a suicide bomber, but I never activated it again. But the like screaming flying down from the kite was an absolute delight and horrifying in the moment. Sierra, I didn't play this on the computer. I played it on our PlayStation. And so when Sierra heard the screaming and looked over at the television, she was like, "Oh my God, what's happening?" As this thing just came careening down to tackle me for half my health bar.
I don't want to. Let's derail this conversation for just a moment in terms of the mechanics and like specific events, because I want to make sure we tackle the 4 different endings, and I think that'll also
Absolutely.
open up our discussion into all of the finer points of the plot or the story.
That sounds good.
So just to verify, everyone in this virtual chat room, I guess you could say, has seen all 4 endings. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So you have the shortened game ending, which is the Shura ending, which is if you follow the Iron Code, which is actually kind of what I wanted to do the first time I played, because I was really intimidated by the owl fight, and I think that was one of the harder fights I had too. Tiffany watched me fight every boss, and because it was over such a short period of time, like, you know, just the last week, and there was a lot of dying, obviously, Tiffany will probably be a better witness to my experience with these boss fights. Just a heads up.
Than you yourself?
Yeah, probably, because some of the fights I think I just don't even remember that well in detail.
You went into a flow state to complete them.
Yeah, some of them, like, I'm pretty sure I fought a few, like, completely ignoring strategy. Regardless, we'll get to that.
He's saying he like died a lot, but he didn't as much. Like, I played the game mostly first, and so he watched me, and so he didn't die as much in it. I'm annoyed by that.
I think I died way more to like some specific stages, to mini bosses and some specific stages of bosses that just did not go well against my play type or my technique. Because like Tiffany and I played extremely differently. I digress though. Endings, real quick. The first good quote unquote or normal ending involves a cycle. I don't know what you would call this ending, but it's the ending where you do not qualify for either of the 2 quote unquote secret
They
endings.
all actually have their own names.
Do they?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So the normal plain one is Immortal Severance. The one where you give him the alternate one with, I think it's the where you kill yourself, is the Purification. And then the really fucking weird one is the Return ending.
So yeah, let's just get right into the heart of it. I mean, I keep saying that, but I'm not sure, honestly, how we begin. But the story of Sekiro being that of trying to, at least in 3 of the 4 endings, eliminate this immortal tie you have to Kuro. In the one ending you do not, the Shura ending, it implies that you have transformed into a Shura demon, or I don't even know if they actually use the word demon along with Shura at the same time.
It's a demon or Shura, which I think is like a more specific or what would it be, proper noun of exactly what demon you are.
And for the record, I'm on my second playthrough now, and I did not get to the Shura ending since I realized I wasn't going to make it in time for the podcast. So I did look ahead, see the surprising 2 bosses that you fight that kind of look like they use recycled movesets. Well, the second of the 2 being an old Ishin is definitely a slower version of the regular last boss with fire attacks, and then you fight. Before that, you fight Emma, thank you, who has a lot of combined moves from Orin and Ishin, it seems like.
Yeah, she uses the Ashina Cross specific skill. Like she has the Ashina Cross move that you can learn that is apparently a move that is only used by the most like mastered Ashina swordsman. So it suggests that she has an incredibly hefty background.
I
with,
mean, it makes sense.
training. Yeah.
She did say she was trained by Ishin.
Yeah, that's true.
Like her background is actually not all that different from Wolf's background, in that she was an orphan of the battlefield and is adopted, kind of adopted, if you want to think of it this way, by both Dogen and the sculptor. Yeah, orangutan. But like ultimately in the more official capacity as time has passed on, seems to actually be officially adopted by Dogen, because what kind of life would you live being raised by an orangutan? And we'll get into the sculptor's past too, because there's a lot of shit that we don't actually know and can only kind of speculate on. But the Shura ending was really surprising to me, because where we see the sculptor's transformation into his own sort of demon of hatred in the other endings, or potentially it's an optional boss, I guess, you become Shura, but you quite honestly don't look that different from your original appearance. And so
I just have a flaming arm.
Yeah, a flaming prosthetic arm.
And another sword.
That's why I don't really think Shura is a demon. I mean, it could be a demon in the sense of like, what am I trying to say here? Like a demon, like
a spirit demon, but not necessarily a monster.
Yes, but I just don't think it's something where people put like the demon of hatred as like sort of a Shura, because that's obviously not Shura.
In fact, I think we get confirmation that from the old woman after you beat the demon of hatred, or someone says to the effect that he did not become Shura.
Yeah, he became the demon of hatred.
Yeah, so those are two separate entities there. The Shura ending, honestly, is like surprising just from the standpoint that like it kind of felt like a very immediate twist that you become Shura by obeying in the code that the game introduces to you at the beginning.
I was hoping you'd make this point so I could bring up that you've already been asked to disobey the code once before, though, by Kuro. And you're forced to already break that tradition. So the game gives you, in the same way, I think that a game like Undertale suggests, hey, maybe don't use violence. We as the gamer are given this decision of like, oh, do I follow what I think or at least what I'm told to follow, or what I think I should, or do I listen to the advice of this like trusted character or counsel?
It's not that I'm disagreeing with you, but I feel like they do it in such a way that it doesn't feel as natural, though, because the first choice or chance you get to disobey the Iron Code, the game literally forces you to obey, in air quotes, the Iron Code, because technically you do end up breaking it within the next like 5 dialogue windows.
And it's impossible to not break the code at Kuro's request. I tried 5 or 6 times in a row, and it just puts you into a like loop where you get a chance to answer again.
So it's not like the game makes it obvious that that's the right choice to make when you face Owl.
I feel like for the first one where you can't break it, I think it's just trying to show you that like that's his mindset. That's how he feels so strongly about it. It's just trying to show you that that's his mentality in a way. It's not really. I mean, of course, it's trying to show you a choice, but it's just trying to show you how strongly he feels about it.
And it's also before, I think, Wolf's completed transformation into the character Sekiro, which maybe I'm focusing on too much, but I really do believe that you start the game as Wolf, and by the end of the game, you are Sekiro.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not that the names necessarily matter, but it's the fact that he no longer has to live by the code, and he's his own man, so to speak. He literally disregards Kuro's direct orders in regards to the purification and return endings. Kuro's wish is that like immortality, or the whole act of immortal severance is done. And from what we see from the lore, and which transitions us to our next ending, what we see from the lore, at least, as we've noted, there's some contention behind this statement because I've been reading some theories that seem to indicate possibly otherwise. But we believe that Takeru and Tomoe, who most likely have their own relationship between divine heir and bearer of the dragon's heritage, they also did the same act of immortal severance, which is why Takeru is dead, I believe. Is that accurate?
Yes. I mean, he got beheaded for sure. And
His head's gone.
there's no
How do
head
we
of
know
him.
that?
Because in the beginning, when they talk about, the beheading towards the beginning,
It's in one of the item descriptions, and it's not like an item. It's actually a text key
Yes.
item
Oh, okay.
that says that
Is it
talks
one of
about
the
his
esoteric
beheading.
texts?
Maybe not one of the esoteric texts, because aren't those the ones that unlock the skills?
Those are the skill tree
and
texts.
if you go
yeah.
through the, is it purification? Yeah, the purification ending, you talk with Emma about the beheading.
Okay.
So Tomoe, there's a decent chance that she is still alive currently.
She did at least teach Genichiro, and I
Yes.
had, I don't know, I had a lot of surprise at the end of this game that I never encountered Tomoe. I thought she was going to appear. I thought that was honestly going to be like a final boss or challenge in the game.
Sorry, a quick heads up. I just brought up the description. This is the Immortal Severance scrap. Part of the book of the Immortal Severance left behind by Takeru. With mortal blade in hand, my blood may be shed. With my blood, the aroma will be complete. The divine realm will be in reach. Immortal Severance will be at hand. I must ask Tomoe to assist with the beheading.
Oh, okay.
So, to go back to Tomoe for a second, her status is definitely one that I think I am going to have the most unpopular theory on, because while the two of you seem to imply that she's probably alive, because she had to be alive, right, to teach Genichiro. And we know, thanks to some of the text here, that Genichiro, Tomoe, and Takeru, and Emma were all four of them were at the Everblossom tree at one point in time. Emma has memories of being there with Genichiro and the last pair of divine heir and dragon's heritage bearer. So we know all four of them were alive at one point in time, but that also would imply, I guess, so this is not like very good evidence or anything. It's just like a comment about the status of these characters at this particular point in time, is that yes, all four of these characters are alive at once together, but Takeru ends up dying at some point. And Takeru ends up dying as a way to open up the divine realm, correct? So perhaps his death not only allows for the immortal severance to take place. I wish I knew how to use that phrase better, but like immortal severance is complete with his death likely. But why would Tomoe need to go to
the divine realm if he dies in order to get there? Yeah.
I mean, she still needs the dragon tears for immortal severance.
I think he uses the mortal blade in the same way that Kuro does.
He also has the black blade too.
Oh yeah, Genichiro has the other mortal blade. And so that was most likely the mortal blade used to access the divine realm the first time, and it's likely that Tomoe could have gone, acquired the dragon's tears, and then they could have completed the immortal severance after that. There's no indication that it had to happen, that he had to be beheaded in order for them to go to the divine realm.
And why do they need all this to go to the divine realm when he was born in the divine realm? He is a citizen of the divine realm. I don't understand that.
Oh, I didn't know that about Takeru.
I don't remember where it says that, but yes, he was born in the divine realm.
I remember that line too.
She was Tomoe, a citizen of it. She's an Okami warrior, so she is one of the women, or it's suggested she's one of the women that you fight, with the swords and shit there.
Mm-hmm.
Or the soccer balls.
Or the soccer
She might have
balls.
actually been a star soccer player.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's actually take a step back for a second. The Divine Realm and the Fountainhead Palace seem to have been a goal for people to reach.
Mm-hmm.
But if people already existed there, like we know that Takeru came from the Fountainhead Palace or the Divine Realm. Like that much we know, and that is likely tied to why he is the divine heir, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a possibility that Tomoe and that the Okami warriors and maybe even the Mist Nobles were not originally from the Fountainhead Palace, and it was only upon their completion of gathering the correct aromas that they were able to reach there. Like possibly, so this happens after the four of those characters, Emma, Genichiro, Takeru, and Tomoe were together at the Everblossom tree at some point in time. But perhaps in opening up their access to the divine realm, that is when all of the people could then move to and populate the Fountainhead Palace.
Potentially, which
So
seems to...
how was he born there then if none of those people were there?
Because I think Takeru might have been there with some pre-existing people at some point in time before.
Okay.
Perhaps Takeru is actually closer to essentially being related to the gods than like Kuro is. And while we're on this too, I just want to take a note that my belief at this point is that as soon as Takeru died, however the fuck the divine heir that power is transferred, I think that is when Kuro was born.
I just like to think of it as like a, even though this 100% isn't it, I like to think there's like a little dragon swimming in their blood, and then like he died and he's like, oh shit, I need to go somewhere else. And then he just went to Kuro.
A parasitic dragon is honestly maybe closer to the point than you mean to be as well. Because I think our discussion ultimately is definitely going to move like deeper into the discussion of immortality, since that's such a core component of the game, both mechanically but also completely story-wise. I guess the one thing about the Divine Realm that I wanted to ask you guys your opinions or thoughts on before we progress further into it is, isn't it that the Okami warrior women and the Mist Nobles have some they have some form of immortality as well, or agelessness in a sense? They can be killed by Sekiro, and they don't actually need you to use the Mortal Blade to deal the finishing blow, but the old women that are up there seem to suggest that they have an endless lifespan, and that comes from drinking the waters from the Fountainhead Palace.
And that's where I believe the Infested comes from, or the Undying, the fake dragon heritage. Honestly, that's probably how the Undying or Infested spread. Because did you kill the fish, Scott?
I absolutely killed the fish.
Nice.
And,
nice. Did you hate the fish too?
Yeah, fuck that fish.
Yeah, fuck that
fish. That fish killed me more than almost any
Neil
other boss.
was like, oh, I don't want to kill the
killing
fish. Like, fuck
Have
the
you?
fish.
Did you look at that fish's face, Neil? I looked at that fish's face and I knew it needed to die.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, yeah. And I think where you're going, Tiff, right, is you saw the insectoid like mass that was on the skeleton of the other fish.
I was actually going to say, like, where you find the fish dead is, in the valley, in the Sunken Valley. Is it
the Sunken Valley? But it's
No,
the Great Apes
place.
little hideout.
So that means
thing.
the Fountainhead Palace goes all the way down there, and that's where the waters pool. So if the infected waters go there and it
I
spreads,
didn't know that you could find that fish's body there after I killed it. I killed the fish, but I just used inference of the other fish body with the like bioluminescent like caterpillar growths that were on it. That's what was going to happen to that other fish.
I don't even think I saw those parasites at the bottom of the lake.
Oh,
Yeah,
this is amazing. I'm excited to see this on my next playthrough.
Well, so
Because I will kill the fish again.
Yeah.
So we do know that the carp that ends up at the Great Apes, the Great Apes little pool of water is definitely the same one, because if you pull the whiskers, or the singular whisker apparently,
You get the
from
item
that
from it.
carp,
Yeah.
you take it back to the guy that is the keeper of the carp or the feeder of the carp or whatever, and he actually has unique dialogue to that with that item.
I missed out on this completely. The lady asked for her, I guess it's her father who is the fish feeder. She asked for her father to not be condemned to feed that fish forever. So I straight up killed him. I just murked him because he's just a more challenging chained ogre moveset. And so I killed him and she had nothing to say about it. This is fascinating. Yeah, this is a side quest that I did not interact with.
Okay,
correctly.
so let's talk about for a second. It might not be Dogen, it might be Dojun, but I think it was Dogen. Someone was researching along with the Senpo Temple about the rejuvenating waters.
It was both of them.
And the experiment involves the children of the rejuvenating waters, which I don't think there's any concrete evidence to know exactly what the experiments were or how they had to essentially sacrifice or endanger the lives of other children. Regardless, though, before we dive into that aspect of the experiment, did the rejuvenating waters at the Fountainhead Palace exist before these experiments? Or did the experiments actually lead up to the Fountainhead Palace waters becoming tainted, we'll say?
I would imagine that the rejuvenating waters have always existed from the Fountainhead Palace. It's called the Fountainhead Palace
I
for
like
one
to
thing,
think
but
that gross giant ass carp is the one that tainted the water.
No,
it keeps shitting in it, and then that gets it taints the water, and people are just drinking shitty tainted water.
I think we really hate this fish, but it's hard to give it it's hard to give it that much agency. I think it's just another example of the differences between these forms of immortality, though, right? The carp has a form that we'd considered of corrupted immortality. They mention it multiple times that these carps ultimately are ageless, live forever. And the only way to kill it is by interacting with those pot nobles who have a way to essentially kill it from the inside out. And that seems to be through. So is it just its dead body in the Guardian Apes area?
It's like its skeleton.
Okay. Oh, I think you even have the
teeth.
Yeah.
Oh, its teeth are so creepy. It has human teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is. I think it's one of the. It's one of the male nobles. The idea is that the nobles can become that carp. They are already fish-like in a sense on how they look, and those pot nobles have the same hands as the mist nobles that we encounter otherwise, and they want to become the carp with the scales.
To simplify the different immortality schemes for a second, we have Sekiro's immortality, which, as far as we know, is only the. All right, I don't necessarily know if it's the perfect quote unquote immortality, because not enough time seems to pass that we can really compare Wolf's appearance from one part of the game to another. So let's just say, for the record here, we don't know what's going on there. We also don't know if Kuro has been a kid all this time. 3 years does pass from the Hirata estate incident to present day in the game, and he doesn't seem to age at what you would consider to be the point at which a boy would possibly go through the early stages of puberty, right?
I mean, I don't know how lazy they're being with it necessarily, because if you watch one of the endings where they return to Sekiro's grave, Kuro also looks the same, but it seems to imply that a fair amount of time has passed, but it's hard to tell. It could be that he just happens to be in that sweet spot where it doesn't look like he's aged, but he has. He truly is ageless.
I thought he looked a little bit older in that ending, to be honest.
I also thought that not much time had passed.
Okay.
But okay, but so like we know for sure though that Sekiro doesn't have a parasite inside of him.
He has that ashen birthmark instead of the dragon's heritage. That's the one physiological thing that we can see.
He seems to resurrect whenever he gets killed. Then you have the immortality of the people of Senpo Temple, and along with your tutorial dummy guy, in which
as well as the guardian ape.
That you kill them, you can continue to kill them, and they continue to live on through the parasites within them. And then you have the Fountainhead Palace, which doesn't seem to be immortality from inflicted unnatural death, but instead immortality in life. But I'm also wondering if that's actually 100% true.
Oh, like for the women, it would most likely be from the dragon, because from the dragon's, when you complete the dragon's mask, it says that the women will wear it and dance for the dragon, and the dragon will rejuvenate them or give them vitality or revigorate them.
That's right.
And so the males must do something slightly differently because, all right, so quick mechanic that I never had occur for me because I'm a baby and don't fight when I'm enfeebled. But if you get enfeebled by the Miss Nobles and they perform their quote-unquote death blow on you, they basically start eating your face.
Oh, I never let that happen.
If you kill a Miss Noble while enfeebled, your death blow is actually the exact same thing. You essentially are eating their face. This is what I've read, at least. So that much we can only take at Faith's word by some random Redditor. But I wonder if the actual implication is that the Miss Nobles, at least, do not have the same sort of benefit that the Okami warriors do. And instead, they're only able to continue living by feeding off the vitality of lesser fortunate Miss Nobles or, other people in general. Because we witnessed this possibly happening when you first enter the palace of the Fountainhead Palace, like the quote-unquote palace itself. Because when you open the doors, you come across red Miss Nobles feeding on blue Miss Nobles, if I'm not mistaken.
Someone said that they were Okami warriors, actually.
I found blue Miss Noble bodies in there last I checked. Okay. So I don't think, but that could also be a possibility too, because the Okami warriors are essentially another source of endless vitality, assuming they continue to dance. And if they stop dancing, they might end up like the old women that you encounter earlier. We're also skipping over the part that I don't know if this is necessarily supported by any sort of evidence, but I venture to, well, actually, it is in some way. I'll get to that in a second. But I believe that the Okami warriors and Miss Nobles were all originally more human in appearance.
I think I can interrupt on the fact that there is some credence to them being formerly mortals, partially because you have the evidence of the old woman whose father became the fish feeder, and you also have the gentleman in the Mist Village who he wants the divine waters, essentially. He's the one who actually guided the Mist Village to try to access the divine realm, and he is thirsty for their water. Like, he wants their blessing, and you can actually give him water that you find in a secret area in Sekiro, which this is the smallest tangent I can make. Some of the secret areas in Sekiro are just phenomenal and so well hidden. The panel walls that I was able to slip through in Ashina Castle, for instance, were some of the most exciting surprises I've found in the game. If you give it to him, he is just completely enraptured by it for the rest of the game, from what I can tell. I didn't check up on him at the very end.
He turns into a noble, actually.
He does turn into a Miss Noble. That's what I thought. So that's further evidence that ascension to the Miss Noble form is just through access to that sacred water.
So, given that bit of context too, and by the way, Tiffany, I think, will know this better than I will because I did not read this myself. But apparently, the warriors in the gun fort are all descendants descendants, is that what they called them, or
Yeah,
related to?
I think it was descendants.
But in some form have relation to the Okami warriors.
Mhm.
And the gun
I see.
fort is going towards. The gun fort is essentially there, in my understanding, to guard what eventually will lead to the.
Guardian Apes pond.
But also, well, I thought it also guarded from. Oh, okay,
The Snake's Temple is also down there as well.
yeah, and if it guards from the the Guardian Apes ponds, that being the direct source of water that of the Fountainhead Palace water that is received from the Divine Realm.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm drawing at blanks.
Here's another connecting element that I can help with.
That's where
The Immortals.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
No, please.
I
Okay.
would say that's where they say that the Fountainhead Palace water pools deeply or pools the most in Ashina is that place. So it makes sense
Mhm.
if they were to guard it there, since it does
Also-
not pool anywhere else.
Let's look at the warrior women, or not the warrior women, but the gun fort women and their character design and the similarity that they have to a certain other type of character. The corrupted immortal monks are covered in bandages and wraps, right, to hide the infestation of these like immortal insects and centipedes. Truly a great choice for such a disgusting and like horrific enemy. The symbolism or representation is the best thing to gross and creep me out about that form of immortality. But they're also wrapped in bandages, maybe because of the corruption of the water as it flows to that point. As we know, the further downriver or the further downstream you go, the more collection of like impurities or like contamination waters have. They live in a poisoned area, which could further suggest the like corruption of the water as it reaches the depths of the sunken valley. And so they're also wrapped in bandages, and I think that is to hide some sort of like disfigurement. And I can't think of another good reason as to why they would be wrapped in bandages otherwise, unless it's being in that toxic place is the reason.
Don't they all drop, or most of them drop like antidote as an item drop?
Yes. I know that at least the ones with the spears and not the like large cannons drop antidotes if you kill them, and you have normally the Bell Demon Curse or balloon of soul, not soul, a balloon of possession.
So the interesting thing that comes to mind right now to me, I keep jumping back to whether or not people were exploiting immortality before like some of the major events of Sekiro take place. And partly that stems from, I believe it's the Divine Grasses description. I'm going to pull that up real quick.
Okay, yeah, I'd do that.
A secret medicine that fully restores vitality and cures all status abnormalities. One small part of Ashina is exceedingly old. The ancient soil, rocks, and water that pervaded the land are said to have attracted the attention of the gods. So that small part of Ashina is either talking about the area closest to the Fountainhead Palace or quite literally the Fountainhead Palace, which we haven't discussed quite yet, but I think there's enough evidence to potentially state that the Fountainhead Palace is part of the Divine Realm, or a point at which the Divine Realm and Ashina meet together. And when I say Ashina, I mean like mortal land.
No, I think so, because ultimately access to it's called the Divine Realm, but I think the Divine Realm is really where you fight the dragon, and everything else is still part of Ashina.
There's a few points of text where it would suggest that the Fountainhead Palace is a part of the Divine Realm, because when you talk to the pot nobles, they say that you smell of the Divine Realm, and that's where the great carp of the Divine Realm are. And so they're talking about technically the Fountainhead Palace, but they call it the Divine Realm.
Okay.
And so the last part of the divine grass's description is the Dr. Dogen studied the plants in this ancient place, resulting in the recipe for this special medicine. So
Seeds for the divine grass are the gourd seeds that you add potentially, and the divine grass, the one place I can think of where you find that item in the Mist Village is actually under a waterfall that results from the pool that starts in the marriage procession area. If you follow that river down to a waterfall, actually tucked in the waterfall, there is a divine grass item, which may further suggest that it was carried downstream.
Man, so Dogen had to be in the Fountainhead Palace at some point in time.
Yeah, I think so.
And Dogen is a character that is like not far removed from the present events of Sekiro. Like he is Emma's foster father or adopted father. And he is the creator of the prosthetic arm.
Mm-hmm.
He also studied the helped create the rejuvenating waters, at least that as we know of in Senpo Temple. Like, man, part of me wants to create like a timeline, a theoretical timeline to actually see how these events unfolded, because I still think there's a possibility that the divine realm, and specifically the Fountainhead Palace, was possibly uncivilized or unreached by normal man.
Uninhabited.
Uninhabited. Thank you. With the exception of like blessed people, if you want to think of it that way, like Takeru. We see Takeru somehow ascends. He quite literally falls off the waterfall into what would become the Great Apes Pond, and then meets a bunch of people and tells them about this awesome divine place. And then they all go there eventually. And that is what we have now. That's like half joking, but like there's a possibility that Takeru is. Yeah, there's that possibility that Takeru and only a few select people, like blessed children of the dragon, essentially are at the Fountainhead Palace.
It would suggest that the mortal interaction is part of what has caused the corruption or the contamination of this area, and therefore the like effect or the use of it.
Which that has to be like an underlying theme to this game, is that it's man's corruption. It's constantly brought up by and towards various characters in regards to the dragon's heritage and the power of the divine heir. People continue to be tempted by Kuro's power, or by the power that comes with the dragon's heritage. It's brought up with Ganishiro. It's brought up with the owl.
Man, I feel like such a chump for taking... Oh, not a chump. I just feel what's very funny is the difference between our interpretations of it, because every one of those interactions, I always thought immortality is the thing that is corrupting these people. Like the promise of immortality is like corrupting their desires and their wishes or twisting their hearts. Additionally to that, we see that everyone who has achieved some form of immortality is corrupted in order to attain that. We either have the infested monks, which I consider... I consider the infested monks, or like Hanbei, like corruption of immortality, or even possession by something that has I guess like a greater mortality or immunity to mortality, like those insects, but also that even the divinity of Kuro or Sekiro, like it's leeching in a different way. Instead of a parasitic infection, like the centipedes, they're literally leeching off of the people around them. They're drawing in mortal energy or vitality passively from the citizens of Ashina. And so it's also not it's not necessarily a divine power in the fact that it is completely pure or sacred. It just has a different perspective in which it is like damaging or corrosive to those who use it and those who are affected by it. Because he wants to sever the immortality, which means Kuro Kuro has this opinion or perspective that it is ultimately bad, and what makes him feel or think that way is because of its impact on other people, I think. As both a corrupting influence in the people who want his power, but also to the like common people of Ashina who are killed. And there is already this like cultural ingrained respect for the dead that is that we can examine by the presence of the memorial mob and the dialogue that they have, and also that the continued research into immortality by, is it Dojin? Dojin is the one who's working with
his apprentice. Yeah.
Yeah, Dojin is Dogen's apprentice, and then he also has the creepy surgical guy who are using this like disgusting red mass or red lump to also try and gain immortality in another sense, which I don't know. It reminded me of the like fleshy mass from Bloodborne's DLC that they had, where I thought that maybe that actually crystallized in one to the fragrance components as well, because they talk about how the red lump remains after these red-eyed like beasts are killed, and the like red crystal or whatever that you find for the marriage proposal could be like a further crystallized or I guess further developed like red mass clump or growth
I
that
thought
they
it was
use
just a
for the
kidney stone,
fragrance.
to be honest. From like drinking the waters, they just got a kidney stone.
No, but like that's kind of the idea that I have, is that that red mass could ultimately become the stone, and it's due to that exposure from the fountain water of the divine realm in its corrupted form that that allows it to like carry the scent, but also grant that different type of like bestial immortality that is hinted at by the item descriptions.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I wish they had explained more about was the in fact, I feel like they did such a intentionally maybe poor job of describing it that I've even forgotten about the dragon rot, right? The core mechanic that essentially keeps you from just going time after time after time after time against the same boss repeatedly, because if you continue to die, you have to cure everyone's dragon rot. Like, I wish we knew the actual cause as to why the death of the bearer of the dragon's heritage causes dragon rot to spread in Sekiro.
What their explanation is that you can only it was like you can only rejuvenate so much of your life, and after that you have to pull life from other people. It was something like that. I know Emma explains it to you.
Okay.
At the very beginning of the game,
Which I have now forgotten.
I honestly think it's a passive version of the active soul sucking that your like Miss Nobles do, because I also looked up that death blow, and Sekiro literally sucks his like vitality or soul back out of their chest if he lands a death blow on them.
It's really curious, like the idea of dragon rot being cured by using, I don't remember what the charm is, but the charm uses the blood, the charm that basically enables you or gives you the flag to use the dragon rot restoration is composed of someone inflicted, or the blood of someone inflicted by the dragon rot. But in addition to that, you also need a dragon blood tier, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And
or you need a dragon's tear droplet. Dragon blood droplet.
All right, so my question now is, I'm going to pull up the description for dragon's blood droplet, because this is what starts to puzzle me. An item that is rarely dropped by a divine heir of the dragon's heritage. Using it will slightly increase resurrective power, restore blah, 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 blah. In turn, all inflicted with the dragon rot will be healed. The incessant coughing must cease. So, an item that is rarely dropped by a divine heir of the dragon's heritage. Like the physical embodiment of something white, and we could almost even say pure, is only represented by one other character. and that would be the child of the rejuvenating waters and her ability to make rice.
Rice. Yep.
But since they signify this as specifically blood droplet, it makes me wonder if that is actually like a creation of what would happen if you try and cut the divine air, or if it's actually like what happens to their blood after it crystallizes and dries.
Yeah, that's what I think. And the divine air, here's part of it, I think, is that the divine air is maybe their immortality is pure in the sense that Sekiro's is not. Since Sekiro's is granted to him from the divine air, it's not necessarily an intrinsic component to him. It is a blessing, or it is a tied-on effect to his existence, while with Kuro, it's like it is an essential part of his being a divine heir, and therefore he has maybe an infinite amount of vitality, or he can restore the vitality of others through like the divinity of his blood. But Sekiro, it doesn't work. And so the use of the dragon's heritage by Sekiro, or anyone who's trying to acquire it from him, he's aware that their continued death and use of resurrection would be what would cause the corruption or the dragon rot, and not necessarily his own like harm or death.
So a couple
he can't be
questions
cut,
from
right?
this. What's up?
He can't even be cut without the mortal blade. So technically
Yeah.
he cannot be mortally wounded. So he would never actually use the resurrective power, right? He can't be killed without a mortal blade, so there's no use for his resurrective power functionally unless a mortal blade was used on him.
I wonder what would happen if he fell from like a really high like distance. Then would his bones just like not break?
I think the ground would break. No, okay, so a couple questions, things to bring up. One, I'm not sure if I'm reading too much into it, and this was at credit to where credit's due. Some random Redditor posed the same question, but why are these dragon's blood droplets so plentiful in the game?
There's
And
only like 17 total.
Seriously?
Yeah.
That
There's
still
less-
seems...
There's less than 20 available, but if you consider this game as a game that people who are not like well versed in Souls-like games might be playing, it should be somewhat forgiving on how many exist.
Man,
But
I don't
the
know.
cost is also
This is
really
my
low.
first Souls game, and I think that's a lot.
Wait, this is your first? You didn't play Bloodborne or Dark Souls?
I played like an hour of Bloodborne, and I didn't enjoy it. Maybe 2 hours. I don't remember.
Which, as a side note, I keep saying this, but I think it's funny because you play this game like I would play Bloodborne.
What I can also add to that, I don't think we need to take too much time on it. The first time I played Bloodborne or Dark Souls, I got my shit handed me so bad, I didn't come back to them each individually for like a year or two later, and then got hooked. So I'm not saying you need to play Bloodborne or try it out, but
It has a lot.
may be more fun.
It has a lot
you
to do
return.
with its aesthetic and its look. It's very ugly to me. Looking at a grayish, brown, whatever color for like hours on end, where Sekiro
And
is
just
very
Gothic
pretty.
architecture. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sekiro is like
They
does a
have
really
amazing-
good job of illustrating like Japanese lore and mythos visually.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Like
just a beautiful game on top of that. Every
Mhm.
area is really well crafted and incredibly unique for such a small portion of the country. Like we're supposed to think that this is a very, very small like province within Japan, and yet there is so much diversity in each area that you visit. I really like it for that.
Okay, so here are the things though about the Dragon's Blood Droplet. Like, even if it's for a mechanical purpose of hey, people are gonna die a lot, we need to make this a more plentiful item. Why would they have them readily available from like most memorial mobs and pot nobles? I maybe get the pot nobles because they would have a more intrinsic connection to a divine heir potentially.
Mhm.
But memorial mobs seem to be in plentiful, or have these like in the plenty. Like I'm checking the Fextra Life wiki right now. Actually, this might not be the Fextra Life one, but the Battlefield Memorial Mob has 2 of them. That's the first one in the outskirts of Ashina Castle. Fujioka, the info broker, also has 2. Basically, every memorial mob has at least 1, it looks like. I also have something that's not immediately connected to this conversation, but it just came to mind. We know for sure that when Takeru was around, that they had access to one particular mortal blade. We don't know if they had both mortal blades.
They did not have access to the other one because it mentions in a text that it was still in the Senpo Tempo, and it was when the high priest was still all like, oh man, I'm immortal, I'm the hot shit, and he went and hid it in the Hall of Illusion, and they could not get to that one.
And we know that there are like so many different factions in this game that are at each other's throats, so to speak. Like Senpo Temple is definitely one that does not seem to align with Ashina's wishes. Or Ishin specifically. Okay, so what would happen if you beheaded a person whose wish was to escape immortality? Takeru, I'm saying.
With the Black Blade, then?
Yeah, is there a possibility that maybe that is actually what created or gave birth to Kuro?
But that would have to mean Kuro's dead. Because it's open gate, and it's a gate to hell.
Perhaps Kuro was okay. Or it's a gate to the afterlife.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
So I think, though, that there's a possibility that if he didn't necessarily have a wish to bring someone back from the dead, that all he did was cause what you could otherwise see as oh my god.
Failed to permanently sever a mortal or the dragon heritage.
I mean that, but what is the belief in rebirth after life?
Are you talking about the like the Buddhist cycle of
there's
reincarnation?
Reincarnation. Perhaps what he caused was essentially just reincarnation.
Yeah, like a maybe the immortal severance. Well, I don't know. I think there is a reincarnation element that could exist in one of the endings.
Yeah. It absolutely seems like it is the case for the return ending.
Yeah, that's true. Okay,
we could talk about the return ending now.
We should talk about the return ending. In this ending, this is the one ending in which someone does not have to die necessarily, but just instead be absorbed.
It's the fusion ending.
Yeah, fusion, huh?
And then she becomes pregnant with him.
Is that it? I couldn't tell if she had a baby bump or not.
I don't know, actually. It just looks like it.
But when she actually joked about it,
to her, it's like she's motioning to her, like the center of her body, so it could absolutely be like a nod to pregnancy, or just like her heart or like her core.
It's like...
It's very hard to tell, because I looked specifically to see if she was like somehow pregnant with a
It's kind of like in the middle of her ribs, so it's hard to tell if it's her heart or her stomach.
It's the sternum, It's like the sternum, which is equally close to both locations.
So I think it is definitely supposed to be a like vague in that regard. But it's certain. I think it's definitely a pregnancy thing. I didn't even think about it until Tiffany actually made the joke about it when we were playing through this ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes me think that, honestly, is the fact that they allude to her purpose being the cradle. Like, you could have called her the vessel or the ship, or any other metaphor at which you carry
that is
one
less
person.
Baby adjacent.
Yeah, but they use cradle, and I think that's very, very specific to not only symbolize her purpose, but to actually be like the nod to motherhood in this case.
Wolf's gonna be a daddy.
I mean,
Sekiro 2, Daddy Wolf.
Well, the the idea too is that like I think it also reaches some biblical elements, which obviously like Christianity is not playing a big role in this particular storyline or game, but the idea of immaculate conception is one that I think transcends a lot of different religions and mythos. So the idea of her becoming pregnant through, in like a quote unquote pure way, I think also leads like credence to their ultimate purpose, which is to eventually deliver. Oh, hey, deliver, another fucking pun. To deliver the divine heir and this magical property back to the West, wherever it came from.
It's probably going to be either China or Korea.
Yeah, China, like...
It looks like a Chinese dragon, but then I read that the sword looks like sort of like was it Korean or Ind? The sword looks like a different type of specific sword. So it's one of the two.
Man. But like, we know this because we are told the dragon came from the West, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when the dragon basically found a particular place that it found interesting or attractive or whatever, being like this place in Ashina, that created this divine realm, or it brought the divine realm, and that's essentially what like is the catalyst to this entire game, right?
That's where you get into a little bit of lore of Japanese mythos about okami, or like kamis in general. And a lot of them have different, I can't remember, they're like special sacred places that they move between. So this place in Ashina is probably just another one of its sacred places that it just is perching for a bit. And that's why it's here, probably, most likely.
So is it the belief that the sacred place existed before this entity, this okami or kami, came, or was the presence of the kami what created the manifestation of the divine realm?
Point of contact.
I believe it's usually that it exists beforehand.
Okay.
Man, we should really brush up on our Shinto and Buddhism before we dig into this. This game just like so effectively utilizes like the Buddhist narrative of reincarnation so effectively that there's a lot of inferences we can make about it as well, which is very useful compared to From Software games that
Japanese history in general.
Yeah, I think it also makes it more accessible to pull apart than like Dark Souls and Bloodborne, which kind of come off of there's not as much like background that you can tie them to from maybe everyday life or history that like let you dig nearly as deep. The Divine Child of Rejuvenation, man. I am curious as to what the rejuvenation also means. That rice that she drops, right, is what does the rice do as an official function? I think it's both. It restores health and posture.
Yes.
And the old lady really wants it. It's like she's also another source of maybe not immortality, but it's like the fountain of youth effect. She can dole out rice of like vitality and rejuvenation and youth in the same way that
it's just some of that good
access
shit
to the dragon.
rice.
Yeah. And she's another synthetic or like facsimile of a divine dragon or being, which is something that's already been tackled by Dark Souls lore and narrative. Specifically with Dark Souls 2, I can't remember who the woman is in the green cape who allows you to level up, but she is a clone of a dragon, or she's made from dragon's blood in that game as well. And I'm just curious how many elements or like tie-ins they have to their other games that kind of exist in Sekiro. It's definitely a product of all of the things that they've worked on, both mechanically and narratively before. And it's really interesting to see the fusion of all of those things come together.
I need someone to find Robert in one of the previous games.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I was really upset that there was no answer to what happened to Robert. Um, I thought for sure he was going to have a greater role in this.
What if I told you there is a character named Robert in Deracine?
Wait, there was?
No, there's not.
God
but-
Oh man, you would have got us. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if we can go much farther into the endings that isn't just like wild speculation. I think it's a good starting point that we can ruminate on more if we eke out more.
I mean, the only ending we didn't talk about is the one where he kills himself, and that one's just like a,
It's called the purification ending, which I think
Yes.
lends credence to my idea that Sekiro is the vulnerability in the dragon's heritage, or the dragon's heritage through Sekiro is the vulnerability to how immortality can damage humanity, because Sekiro is the only individual who cannot die and acts as a siphon of people's vitality. And so by killing himself, he has both severed the immortality of Kuro,
and
as
permanently
well
severed
as
it.
permanently
everyone.
severed it, and he's also taken it away from himself, the only remnant or vestige of the dragon's heritage.
So, I mean, like, it's important to point out, though, that the difference between that and the return ending are that he is effectively, and I could be misreading it, or there could be things that we don't necessarily know. Like, maybe this is technically going to do is just create a new divine heir someplace else. But the impression I got from it was that he is essentially destroying the power known to as being the divine heir of the dragon's heritage.
That's what it seemed like, yes.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
it's like he basically eliminates entirely.
Unless this is exactly what Takeru and
Takeru
Tomoe
did.
did, except for it was opposite. And this is what they were supposed to do, but failed, and that's why it continued.
They failed because they used the wrong blade.
And it was on the actual hair or the air.
As opposed to the receiver.
Which would give further credence to the potential existence of Tomoe. Oh man, we talked about two. Go ahead.
If Tomoe's alive, then whose grave is it by Takeru?
I mean, they can still put a grave next to it.
And more importantly, who is the white-haired woman praying at the stone where you pray to confront
the divine dragon?
Yeah. I think that's Tomoe.
I've thought about it, but I'm not sure.
I just don't think that's Tomoe. I honestly don't.
I think we have this. But that's the entire point. We encounter not subterfuge. We encounter unexpected power.
Why would she go up there to the dragon which she probably took the arm off of, and then just decide to sit on the rock next to it?
Was it the arm, or was it? Oh no, it would not be the branch
She
of the
would be the
Everblossom.
She would be the only one able to do that.
I mean,
Take the arm off of the dragon.
and potentially Sekiro by the end game, right?
Quick.
Well, does Sekiro know lightning attacks?
Quick, yeah. So here's where I want to jump in before we lose this, because I think this. I did not think about it until now. Praying. So we assume this white-haired woman, she's dead, right? She's.
Well, I mean, we don't know.
died
She
praying,
could
or
literally be praying.
She's just
to
locked
the
in a
dragon.
praying state. Yeah. What happens in that fight when you fight the divine dragon? You use lightning to strike him down. Where is the source of this lightning? Is it the divine dragon, or is it coming from the white-haired woman praying at the rock? Is she channeling lightning to Sekiro to
There's
damage
lightning
the dragon?
all around you, and there's lightning being used by the Okami warriors. I don't know why it would be the white-haired woman doing it.
But let's illustrate one
I
point.
think of
that
her
the
as
lightning,
a conduit to the lightning.
The lightning doesn't seem to actually be aiming for you in the boss fight. The lightning is, I mean, like, not just from a
When you're
mechanical
going
standpoint.
up the path, that could easily have hit you.
Well, but I think that's also like a possible natural occurrence of lightning.
So
like,
then it could be an easily natural occurrence in the clouds
no,
up there.
you're right. But I think it's
If
also
if she's a conduit of lightning, it could also be not only appearing in the divine realm against the dragon, but a natural consequence of her being there.
So the divine realm is not going to work in the same physical manner that like the geographical locations work in this game, right? So I think the lightning that appears in the divine realm has to be considered a possible different occurrence, or and have different causes. And I say this just to distinguish the fact. Oh, and let's also talk about the lightning that happens before you get to the stone to pray at. The lightning, technically, despite my cowardice, never actually goes for you in those strikes.
I bet you could get hit by it. I absolutely bet you could get hit by it.
Maybe if you jumped and hit the poles at the right times. But like, it seems like what that is there for is literally just to
unnerve you.
Well, I was going to say from a mechanical standpoint, just look badass as you're running through those gates, right? Because if you're just running through the gates like normal, all it does is just illustrate like it sets the scene. You get to the praying stone after getting your ass kicked by Okami warriors like I did. You get to the praying stone where a woman is already praying potentially
she's not dead.
But even if she did die, she died while in the act of praying. So that means her consciousness or her embodiment or something could still be within the divine realm. You're in the divine realm, and Scott, as you put it, the lightning there really seems to be there more to help. Not just from a mechanical standpoint, but also potentially from a narrative standpoint. Tomoe might actually be helping you fight that boss, or serving as the catalyst at which it allows you to fight the boss.
That's my new pet theory for sure.
Shit, that's good. That's good. I mean, it'd be cool to see. Oh, and I was also going to say too that like, the game does really follow a lot of Dark Souls and Bloodborne patterns of like the sheer size of a person or thing should honestly indicate
power.
Yeah, that's usually what it does. But then you face Emma, who has a mastery, assuming you do the Shura ending, a mastery of all of these techniques. That implies, despite the fact that she doesn't have rejuvenating powers or
She's
two death blow icons.
Yeah,
she has to be she has to be extremely talented and strong.
Well, we all know the principle that exists for anybody who's played a lot of Soulsborne, and that is when you find an enemy that's not massive but has boss music and a giant health bar, they're horrifying. They're normally very fast and do just massive amounts of damage. The hardest fights I can think of in Bloodborne are against other hunters that are boss fights, especially in the DLC against essentially is it Annalise? Whoever the doll is essentially mimicked after. Like, she's one of the hardest fights in the entire game. And in Sekiro, we have Lady Butterfly, who is, I think, particularly challenging and very difficult. And once again, a small, frail woman, as we're supposed to be led to believe. And I'm trying to think in Dark Souls specifically of some like humanoid or character model size bosses, which I cannot come up with right now, but it's more reassuring to think of Tomoe as bound or locked into that. Like, that is Tomoe at the rock, and for whatever reason, that is her final resting place, or she is immobile or inert as far as like
the
the
more
plot.
Reassuring?
Because
why wouldn't you want her to be next to her? It's assumed that they might have been like lovers because the way they talk about them.
If you're into loving little boys.
I mean,
we don't know
sorry.
that he's little. Yet you assume that.
It's reassuring only in the sense that
You're right.
When you're able to lock down an element in these types of games, like it's good, because I thought that Tomoe might encapsulate a similar role to like Gwen's firstborn son, who we did not see until Dark Souls 3, but was like a key player to the entire lore of that series. By having Tomoe there, or at least accounted for. The only people I'm worried about really solving mysteries for at this point are more the histories of like Ishin and the sculptor monk, but as well as Dogen and Dojin. I feel like they still have maybe incomplete or not entirely fleshed out storylines. And so if they were to ever make a second game, which I've told Neil since playing Sekiro, I'm almost convinced that these like From Software just making a new IP like Bloodborne and a new IP like Sekiro every time they make a game is immensely more satisfying than making 3 Dark Souls in a row. And I should qualify that Dark Souls 3 did come after Bloodborne, but the fact that a Sekiro 2 could happen, Sekiro 2 Journey to the West, Sekiro Games Play Twice ending, it has me very excited. They still have a lot of content or subject material that they can touch upon in a way that I think that Bloodborne, at least to some degree, wrapped up on.
They could even just do some DLCs right now.
Yeah.
Right now,
that's right. There's going to be DLCs for this game.
Yeah.
And what the hell is the relevance of the Bell Demon besides as a mechanic? Like, the Bell Demon is fascinating to me, but there's no explanation besides the mechanical explanation from like a fourth wall breaking perspective. Like, you as the gamer or the developer understand the Bell Demon, but within the lore of the game, besides being a vengeful spirit, like there's no explanation whatsoever of it. Unless it's a fragment of like Asura or some other form of demon. There's so many unanswered questions in this game, and it gives more answers than almost any other game I've played by From Software.
So, but I've got your list here of notes, and there's a handful that regard the story, and the first one that comes that is here is specifically the unfair destruction of multiple characters, one of which being the Yamauchi clan.
Okay, so I actually wanted to transition to this, and I'm glad that you picked up on it. The biggest question that I have is, what did the Yamauchi clan do wrong? Because I don't know if you noticed on the mini boss lineup, but there are at least 3 characters that have the surname of Yamauchi that you fight as you progress through Ashina.
Is that the spear bearers?
One of the spear bearers, yeah.
One of them uses a sword, and he's in, I think, if not the tutorial area, then right afterward, where he's on the path on the Ashina outskirts. Then there's General Tenzen, who is, I believe, the one either at the steps of Ashina Castle or who has the map in front of him on the Ashina outskirts, who uses the Nodachi, which is just the larger samurai sword. And then Seven Spears Shikibu Toshikatsu Yamauchi, who is one of my favorite mini-boss fights and one of the harder ones I fought because I could not tell the difference between his sweep and his stab icons.
Is that the one that was at
the Moonview Tower?
Okay. Yeah, I fought that one like legitimately a couple times, got really close and died both. So I ended up hanging off by a cliffside and just whacking him with a sword.
The way that I killed him was bananas. We ended up having a fight where he like charged at me or he swept at me or something, and he fell off the edge of the cliff onto the like ledge side that you're supposed to sneak upon. And so we ended up in a tight, like, I don't know, 5-foot radius area where if either one of us got knocked back, we'd fall off the cliff edge. Though this is the one game in which you can't just like push an enemy off a cliff with damage. But if they hit you with a sweep attack and knock you back, that's an instant kill. And we had a very, very close final death blow fight in that tight space. And so I was like, a couple of these fights literally got me to the point where my heart was pounding so fast that I was like, I would lose feeling in my hands, or I'd feel like after I was done, like I need to stand up and walk around or I'm gonna vomit from like just like the pure adrenaline going through my body. This gave me greater gamer highs than I had ever experienced in another game.
I don't really understand why you can push or have knock off some bosses, but then like some mini bosses you can't knock off. Like there's just some that you can and some you can't.
Yeah,
So-
I heard that you guys cheesed, or at least that Neil cheesed the Demon of Hatred.
I was the one that told him to.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I earned it. I earned every single one of these wins. Except I still
love
have.
the cheese. Cheese is the best.
I truly have no idea how I beat the second Guardian Ape boss fight. I cannot remember. That one was a fugue state. Like I just remember it being over and being nauseous.
That boss is absolutely shit. I hate that one.
I would fight.
Before we talk about the
Okay.
bosses, Yamauchi clan. That's got to be another of the 4 families that supports the Ashina clan. Then
Probably.
If we go back to the history, that's just one of God damn it, I already forgot. This story, Sekiro is like literally
It's
almost,
carved out a historical.
Yeah, almost verbatim is just history. And I can't remember.
It's part of the Sengoku period. That's all I remember, and that it essentially can fit within something that's happened in real world history to some degree.
so I don't recall if the Hirata family is actually part of historical note.
It is.
It is? Okay. But the Yamauchi family, the fact that there are 3 people, it's likely one of the other 4 clans.
Yeah.
So we know 2 of them now, Hirata and Yamauchi. I mean, if they're all based on historic relevance, then
the
we would
Ashina
know
clan,
all 4
right?
of them. So I was actually playing this game thinking it was the Ashikaga clan, which was at least during the early Sengoku era. Late. They were actually the shogunate.
Okay.
So I had to correct that. I had to look it up at some point in time and realize, it's just a minor family. So
The Yamauchi and never mind, are all retainers of Ashina clan, or would have been in the history.
So is Hirata one of the families?
No, they were one of the 4 clans that served Ashina.
Okay, so they technically are a little higher up than the retainers.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. The unfair destruction of Robert's dad. I don't think this is unfair at all.
No, it's not.
You don't think so? He wants to find his son and he's raging around.
No, he doesn't want to find his son. He wants to get his son immortality.
Yeah. It's just a dad doing his best.
Dad doing dad things.
It sounds like
Going full rage mode.
whoever Robert actually is, Robert is probably back west, like where
He's not
he
a
came
dad
from.
guy.
Playing with firecrackers
That's
back
true.
west.
Oh, that's true. His
Yeah,
dad could have.
that's right.
His dad could have easily. Well, yeah. Okay. So here are the 2 things, right? Firecrackers are primarily known to have originated in China. Yeah, and therefore I've always associated firecrackers primarily with an Eastern technology. By 1500, firecrackers have probably occupied most of Europe as well as Asia. But I thought of it as maybe Robert became interested in the firecrackers during his time there, and is actually he could be west then, but at some point in time did come east. As opposed to, I think the other idea is that Robert's dad is out east looking for a cure for Robert back home in the west. Either way, Robert's his story is not over yet.
Or maybe it's over because we killed his dad. Robert's firecrackers makes a deafening sound. Let's see. Their voyage brought them to Japan, where they would seek the Undying in an attempt to extend
Their
Robert's life.
voyage, yeah.
So
I think
he
Robert
was brought
might be
here.
present.
Robert somewhere. Or maybe he's already dead. Who knows?
And-
Maybe that's Robert up in Fountainhead Palace praying at the rock, you know?
Oh,
Maybe
man.
Robert's actually a girl's name.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, maybe Robert's the snakes. I didn't actually bring up the snakes, but I'd like to. I know that they are they're mostly used as a connection to like divine power, right? And I guess you could think of a snake as a lesser dragon in a sense. They're just bad at growing legs. But I killed the snake in the well, both snakes caused problems for me when I got their livers or their is it their liver? I think it's their liver.
Yeah, it's the liver.
Yeah. The snake liver that I got using the puppet mechanic in order to get into the underground temple in the Sunken Valley, I did so, and then instead of teleporting out using my homeward idol, I attacked the snake with
A bunch of
like
times.
his side.
Yeah.
It doesn't die, right?
No. Yeah. No.
No, I didn't think so. You have to use the homeward idol out.
No, you don't. If you look up, there's an exit.
Oh, and where does it take you? Does it give you any items after you exit?
Yes, it gives you like 3 divine confetti, something else. There's a few items in there.
Okay, so I'm a big idiot, and I attacked the snake until it slammed against the side of the building and killed me with the slam.
I attacked it a
after
few
I
times
picked it
too.
up.
I tried to have Neil attack it too, just because I wanted to see him get hit.
Yeah. But
I
for
don't
the
blame
other
you.
one that you dropped down on, the to get the fresh viscera, I did so and ended up on the other side and then went to look over the bridge and accidentally fell down into the pond below.
Mhm.
So I was never able to go over to that area and access the item that was behind me, which I have no idea what it was, or see where that shortcut led to because there was no way across afterward.
It doesn't lead to much of anything. It's just a dead end with some items, like a Jizo, a statue, and like 2 other items, I think.
I was hoping I didn't miss anything core because it's
No.
it's essentially a one-time opportunity to pick up those items, and I completely
Mhm.
fucked it up.
Just to be
see.
clear, those I think you called them livers. I think they're
Viscera.
They're
Hearts?
the hearts specifically,
Yeah.
yeah, because they're persimmon.
Persimmons
shaped.
look like hearts.
I thought she called them
Um,
livers.
Hearts indeed. This the
The last thing I want to talk about is how if you kill Genichiro in the first fight, he lands a cheap shot and cuts your hand off anyway.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, one of his night jars throws a shuriken at you, and when you deflect it, he cuts off your arm. It's actually nice though, as Vadi Vidya or Vadisvati notes that this just further outlines the fighting style of Ashina. It doesn't care about honor; it's about winning.
Mm-hmm.
Winning is always the most important thing.
Which
That's
does
what-
explain the death of Genichiro. Like Genichiro's eyes flash red after you kill him after the lightning of Tomoe fight, indicating that he may have some sort of red lump or like slight attachment to I guess greater mortality. I don't know whether to say greater mortality because it's harder to kill him or lesser mortality because it's harder to kill him.
Yeah, his immortality is a little strange because he doesn't show signs of infestation, but he
Yes.
did drink the water because she says he drinks the very concentrated part of the. I forgot what the exact word she says, but he drinks a very concentrated part of a water. I can't remember.
Mm-hmm. And then
So his is a bit strange.
yeah, and then he has to, in order to resurrect Sword Saint Ishin, he kills himself using the mortal blade.
Mhm.
Not
The
even
black
in a
one specifically.
yeah, not even in a decapitation method as much as a just like creating a hole for Ishin to climb out of, which I don't necessarily understand. That was the one part where I was like, this is amazing and fascinating, but I don't get how he can be like resurrected or reincarnated within Genichiro.
Yeah, I definitely didn't understand it at first either until I started reading some of the items and stuff too. And then I was like, okay, I get this a bit more now.
Could you give me a simple explanation?
Okay, so you got the black scroll in Ishin's area, right? That talks about the black scroll or the mortal how it's called like open gate, and it opens a gate to the underworld.
Okay.
Um
And since Ishin
You-
has died, he can be resurrected by the opening of that gate to, I assume,
Yes.
hell, considering the
And
man.
with the black blade, you can actually sort of make a wish and in a sense, the person that you resurrect has to follow that. So multiple times Ishin states that he's not interested in using the dragon heritage or the dragon's blood.
Yeah, but he's bound by the wish from the Black Blade.
Mm-hmm.
And he even says that when he's summoned,
Coming out.
My grandson's only wish is to see Ashina's glory. Okay, so really Genichiro is just like he's a fascinating character. I really like him and enjoy him. But it's pretty wild that he is. I don't know. I was thrown completely for a loop that Ishin returns as the Sword Saint because I didn't make that connection, and I thought, has this been his underhanded plan this whole time to die and be reincarnated as like a demigod, more or less, to wreak destruction?
At some point, Genichiro probably realized he would never be strong enough to win back Ashina, but he knew his
that's after he lost to me 3 times.
He knew who his grandfather would be because at his peak he was like insanely strong, so that's why he knew that he was the one who orchestrated a lot of this overthrow.
So I mean, it seems though that like his plan changes at some point, and I think it's after you beat him the first time. Well, not the first time, but the second time.
One of the times.
Yeah,
after
the second
lightning
time
of
if you beat him
Tomoe.
3 times.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, after you beat him there, I think that's when his plan changes, because he does, like, the fact that Kuro is there to begin with is all Genichiro's doing. Like, Genichiro does truly intend to use Kuro, at least according to some of the...
I think he even
in-game
explicitly
text.
states it, like,
Yeah.
will you not give me the dragon's heritage? And then Wolf shows up, and he's like, hey, butt out. I'm asking a
even
favor.
before that, in some of the blood memories, he maybe even implies that he potentially wants multiple people to have the dragon's heritage.
Maybe
And
the
I
Yamauchi
think maybe
clan.
his... I mean, if they had him, like, those guys gave me some trouble.
Yeah, they really needed it.
And if they had it, dude, like, they'd be unstoppable. You give the divine spears or the 7 spears of Ashina immortality, and you're good. But I think it might even be implied that he wants it for himself and he wants it for other people. But there's like a degree of like, this is where like the conflict between all of these multiple factions within and outside of Ashina start to complicate matters, because the Senpo Temple is potentially working on the wishes of Genichiro, but definitely not towards the wishes of Ishin. The Interior Ministry and the Owl seem to be in cahoots together.
Sort of.
But we're not necessarily sure.
In the Shura ending, Owl explicitly states that he is going to deal with the Interior Ministry.
And the Interior Ministry states that they're just using him as well. They're just using each other.
Yeah, that's... But to the effect of like, we don't really know what the Interior Ministry wants. There's a possibility, like, because the Interior Ministry, I think, are actually have some connection to the dwarf shinobi that we know as rats. But we know explicitly that the dwarf shinobi are also agents of Senpo. So, and it just further even complicates things even more, because I think the fighting styles are also supposed to illustrate some allegiances and connections as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Like the purple assassins that I believe are confirmed Interior Ministry shinobi.
Yeah.
In fact, they are the Interior Ministries. This is going off memory. I'm not reading this one. They're the Interior Ministries, like 7 or 9 or something, elite shinobi that all have various expertises.
We also
ranging
didn't see
from,
all 7.
Right, ranging from poison to
Spears
dogs.
Or dogs, yeah.
So I think that was the description, poison to dogs, and it refers to specifically the one you fight in the dojo after you get to the dojo a second time, and then you have the dog one in the in the second time you go to the Hirata estate.
The dogs with the headbands.
Wait, the dog.
Fucking Naruto dogs.
Oh,
Dogs wear headbands.
I don't remember this at all. Like, I don't remember the dog guy, but I know that there was a dog one if you went back to the snake shrine.
Yes,
and then you also fought the spear one in the snake shrine as well.
So the dog one in particular, you can fight in the past. If you go back to Hirata to get the Everblossom branch.
Oh, okay, that's why I didn't complete that part of the quest, and that's why I was only able to get Immortal Severance.
So the thing about those purple guys, though, so we know they're Interior Ministry agents. All of the purple guys, assumedly, like not just the Elite Seven, but they all probably are. They use Senpo Temple fighting arts, and so that makes me think that Senpo Temple is not necessarily while it is affiliated to Ashina, most likely just due to its geographical location. That there's actually no official connection there otherwise. But we do know that Dogen was, and this is not permanent evidence or this is not concrete, but we know Dogen was researching the rejuvenating waters, so likely he had some relation to Senpo Temple.
Okay, yeah. And my New Game Plus goal is to unlock that particular path of skills, is the hand-to-hand combat skills from the temple. Because I didn't use those at all.
I got some of them. They seemed okay.
Okay.
I thought the exorcism fighting art one would work well against ghosts, and it does not.
What is it? I
There's
didn't
one
use
called
one
Exorcist Fist or something.
Exorcist Fist.
It's like a cool ability. I think it has its purpose, but it is not especially effective against apparitions or ghosts.
Gotcha.
So don't even try using it there. Otherwise you just get your shit kicked in. So I don't know, is there anything else story related that we want to talk about? There's obviously more.
We didn't talk about the sculptor at all.
Oh yeah, the sculptor.
That is
his history.
The history of the sculptor, literally the one note that we haven't tackled on my end is there really is this once again cyclical or recursive nature of you essentially being the next round or the next extension of the role that the sculptor may have played at some point in time in a previous history, due to you both having your arms cut off, due to you taking over the sculptor's role if you take the Immortal Severance ending.
Due to you both losing someone too.
Yeah, due to you both being corruptible and therefore able to become a manifestation of Shura, who I also looked up the Japanese definition on Shura because I thought it reminded me of Ashura, which is actually a Japanese way to regard the demigod in Buddhism of war, which is Asura. And so it looks like one person had stated in this cursory glance that it may be used to describe a person who fell into a situation in which they have to fight an endless war against something in a relentless or inhumane manner. Which is, it is a very, that's a very clear association with what we see with both of the Shura manifestations in Sekiro, or I guess in Wolf, or in the Sculptor Monk. And then, I don't know, also the, I guess they're both trained as shinobi as well. I don't think the Sculptor Monk was found on a battlefield, though, like Emma and Sekiro, but there were just so many overlapping similarities. It was very hard to disassociate the two from not kind of being a later manifestation of one another.
But I almost think it's kind of a red herring because they also the sculptor has a lot of background information that we can kind of piece together. But it's also extremely hard to determine what events happened where. So we know and in contrast, Wolf's memory is horrible. Like, we don't
It's
know
really
anything
bad.
about Wolf. So we can talk about Wolf real quick just because it's so short.
Wolf probably got beat by his dad. That's why he has a bad memory.
I mean, that would be the easiest explanation. All we get to see from Wolf is that he is adopted and trains by Owl and Lady Butterfly, if not possibly more people that we will eventually meet in DLC.
Mm-hmm.
But then we are only shown one scene in the past, which is him being introduced to Kuro, in which Kuro is not shown. And I think that's very intentionally, because that, like, if we had seen Kuro at that point in time, however many years before the Hirata estate and before the present game, maybe like a big spoiler to the nature of Lord Kuro and Takeru. But I think the big thing to point out is that, like, we really don't know what Wolf has done beforehand aside from hang out with Kuro, because Kuro talks about how they would do shit together, whistle together, that type of stuff, which that does draw a comparison to the sculptor and his friend King Fisher, who
Or
also
woman friend,
Yes.
lover, possibly.
Yeah, I think lover.
possible lover. But then aside from that, Wolf spends 3 years that we have no idea what has happened after the events of the Hirata estate.
And he needs to be reminded of what happens even.
Yeah, and he spends those 3 years in a well, not doing anything, but somehow surviving, maybe even without food. Who fucking knows? Like, how?
He's technically immortal at that point. No, yes?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
He's technically immortal at that point, so he could, I guess, survive without food. He'd just starve and then be revived. Just lay there.
I mean, there's a possibility that, like, he doesn't need food ever, and what he gets is what his power allows him to do is to leech off of the vitality of others. And if it's only hunger and nutrient, or if it's only hunger that he is like, that he
He's
is
lacking,
enduring,
Yeah.
it just means that people around him are maybe eating slightly larger diets.
He's a hidden tapeworm.
Yeah, basically, right?
Yeah.
So when we look at the sculptor, we know he was active before he lost his arm, because at some point in time, Shuro was starting to take over. He loses his arm to Ishin, which then essentially prevents
It
Shuro
halts the
from
progress,
completely
yeah.
taking over. And then he gets the prosthetic arm from Dogen, and is active after that at some point in time.
Mm-hmm.
The rough thing is, because we know Ishin is like a badass, he could have possibly done the disarming of the sculptor at probably any point in his life.
Mhm.
Like, we know probably not more recently, because the sculptor has been making a shit ton of these Buddha carvings. So it's alluded to that it's likely from the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a possibility that the events that have happened in during like the rebellion, in which Ashina takes over the lands that are then known as Ashina, that he might have actually been missing his arm at that point in time too. So it's just, the sculptor's past is so cloudy that we don't really know. We can't really say definitively when his arm was lost and when he was being overtaken by Shura, and how long he used the prosthetic. Because you imagine that, like, the fact that he has the prosthetic and is so familiar with it would indicate that he likely had to master its use, much like Wolf does.
Mm-hmm.
But the sculptor's so interesting. Like the Kingfisher, Kingfisher rather, not the Kingfisher. Who is this Kingfisher person?
There's like a slightly enough information, but at the same time, not nearly enough information about her. Assumed her.
And so I did read that the use of him referring to his old training partner is in the original script a non-gender term
In Japanese?
So, yeah, so it's
Okay.
likely just a mistranslation.
Okay.
It's really difficult to know if his past really has much relevance either, aside from being a possible warning of what could happen to Wolf / Sekiro if you go with the vanilla ending. Like it does certainly seem to offer up like the potential of a cyclical, repeatable history, much like Dark Souls and Bloodborne, possibly. But at the same time, like they both technically have very different histories, and Sekiro is honestly more of like the embodiment of the sculptor and Tomoe together in terms of their roles.
Mm-hmm. Do we know where the finger comes from as far as which hand the finger is from? Just out of curiosity.
I think through the artwork, it looks like it comes from a left hand.
Yeah,
that would definitely.
You know who else?
It's just.
You know who else is
Go ahead.
missing a left hand, a whole left arm? Is the Divine Dragon? Just out of curiosity. Another source of dismembered arms that we can't trace anything to.
Sculptor married or possibly was a lover with the Divine Dragon.
Maybe the guardian ape consumed the Divine Dragon's arm.
Yeah, it's wild. Speaking of the guardian ape, here was one thing. Like, I think we're gonna move into bosses here, probably pretty quick on subject material. The guardian ape phase 2. Did you find the second passageway into the cave from above? Did you know of the second passageway?
I knew of it, yes.
Okay.
But I did not use it because... So yeah, Guardian Ape, boss fight. Let's talk boss fights.
Okay.
Do we need to talk about the first Guardian Ape first and foremost?
It's
the flinging one?
It's the best phase 2 fight I have ever been surprised with.
That was like, I think for me, maybe like the second hardest or third hardest boss fight.
It was very, very difficult.
Specifically phase 1.
Oh, I thought phase 1 was easy. I thought phase 2 was very difficult for me.
What? How the fuck? Like, I think, Tiff, you believe the same thing, right?
It's because I told you what to do, though. If I did not know what to do, because it takes forever to figure out what the opening is, it's very hard for the second phase. Until you figure out what you need to do, it looks like there's absolutely no opening with that boss.
Yeah, so I definitely have like a skewed opinion on it, but I feel like my approach to every boss in that game always defaults to I'm going to hold guard for 5 minutes straight and see what happens. So like that's so I like, even though you told me how to beat the second phase of that boss, I feel like I probably would have figured it out sooner.
And I do remember you saying before, because you did not remember, and you were like, I don't know how to beat this boss. What do I do? And
yes. Well, specifically the first form of that boss. I just can't. I don't know how you reliably kill the first form of that boss.
And I know you did set it for the second phase, too.
I might have.
A lot of
well, my second time through, I didn't. I do know that.
I know, but the first phase. First time.
You just have to, like, if I don't know. I thought that his patterns got pretty predictable, and the problem is with these non-guarding, these non-humanoid enemies is that their posture immediately recovers like very quickly, so you have to, like, I always had to bring down the vitality on him, but there are a lot of opportunities where if you get him at like half or quarter vitality, you can really start doing a lot of posture damage, and you just need to make, like, it's a long fight, I think, but if you deflect on, say, I think there's a 5 swing combo when he's coming at you, or when he gets down on the ground and flails, like you can deflect effectively like 6 or 7 times to really build up his like posture damage. And that seemed to help me. Once I figured out just his deflection patterns, there's like not much else to worry about. The poo flinging, you run at the poo, so it goes past you, and then he's just got a sweep where you can jump on his head after the sweep. He doesn't have any sort of stab attack until... Does he even have a stab attack when in phase 2? I don't think so.
Not a kanji stab attack.
Yeah, so yeah, he doesn't have a Makiri counter available stab attack, but he's got a lot of options for you to do posture damage, and you just can never relieve the pressure on him.
So it shows how differently I can tell how differently we play. Because, that boss was pretty easy for me in the sense that I play like a little bitch. It's how I play.
The safe way.
The safe way, I guess. It was, since it was a large area, I get a lot of room to just run around him. For the poo, you just go left. When he's just flailing around, you just go to his head and hit his head.
That's true too. That's another option that I took. And if you have the attack during the grapple animation, that's a great way to start initiating damage.
You just literally just wait for the few times where there's safe openings, and then you just run around him and he can't catch you.
You get like 2 to 3 slashes in. But I agree with Tiff that you can either be incredibly high pressure or you just draw out the fight. Like you just don't let him get his grab on you, and you don't let
You're just so incredibly fast, no
posture.
boss can catch you.
It's just, I feel bad if I extend a fight out to like 20. It wasn't 20 minutes, but it feels like
minutes,
that.
Yeah.
It feels like that specifically because like a lot of his forms or a lot of his openings are false openings. So like when he shows his back to you, he could do one of 3 things. He could actually just be showing his back to you and it'd be an opening.
He'll fart on you.
Yeah, the second one is he farts on you. And the third one is he spins around and smashes you 3 times.
That's why you never go for the back. When he shows it to you, you're just like, no, that's not an opening.
But so it's just so hard for me to like, I don't know. It's a fucking ape. And so maybe it's supposed to feel, or it's definitely supposed to feel this way. But it seems really hard for me to predict in the same way that I felt like Genichiro and Ishin in all of his forms was much easier for me to confront. But in contrast, the headless form, I like as Tiffany alluded to, she told me like the one tell where he raises his arm all the way up, like that's a really telegraphed hit, and that made the fight like extremely easy for me.
Mm-hmm.
And
the delay on it, I think, is supposed to it coaxes somebody like me into trying to deflect too early, because if you successfully land the deflect, right, he's down for quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like 7
and then normally
hits in.
gets up and does a scream, which you have to be ready for. But that got me so many times because I'd go to deflect early and then just get smashed.
Also, if you when he gets on the ground, if you have your spear and you put your spear in his holy throat, you pull out his worm and he won't scream right afterwards, and it'll do some damage.
I had no idea.
When you see a headless enemy, you got to think to yourself, how do I put my spear
Shove
in
a
that?
spear down it, yeah.
I don't think that works for the headless, so don't listen to that advice.
They were interesting mini bosses. I almost actually liked fighting the ones underwater versus the ones that made the environment made it so you couldn't move faster, so you had to slow walk in their fights.
I just didn't fight
appealing.
them until much later in the game, and then
they're not really worth it, in my opinion.
They're not.
Yeah.
They don't give you shit except for
the
shit.
permanent
The
candy,
stances,
which you then already have so much candy, you don't need permanent candy anymore.
Exactly.
Let's go to the second Guardian Ape fight, which brings in his girlfriend.
And her
fight.
corpse above hand, or another Guardian Ape corpse in the passage above.
It's the same Guardian Ape.
There's it's the same. Okay, so it's the same Guardian Ape because it's headless, trying to get to the. It's like trying to get to the resurrective waters. It looks like, but it can't. If you take the cave route from above, which I don't know if you can actually get, if you can actually execute a death blow from above on him from the top of the cave, but there is the skeleton of another like great ape and fur nearby that I don't know if that symbolized like I don't know what that meant, honestly. And there was one monkey above it as well, or like one chimpanzee, I guess. And so I was very confused. You can kill the chimpanzee, but and because the brown ape in the fight doesn't resurrect, I was like, this can't be the same ape. I just don't understand where the second one necessarily comes in, or the relevance of the corpse of the other great ape. But it may just be because it was a den that they all lived in.
Yeah, I didn't notice the other corpse or anything.
The corpse might be his original girlfriend that it talks about when you get the memory.
Oh yeah.
You guys had a lot of trouble with this fight. I think I did this one on
Yeah,
my
it was
first
really
try.
hard. You got to be kidding me.
Tiff?
He did. He also watched me play it.
Oh, so I
And
didn't.
he also watched the video on how to cheese it, so...
How do you
The-
cheese it?
Was it really a real cheese?
No,
is
it's
my
not really a
question.
real cheese, but...
It's just that, like, you. Oh, yeah. Okay, that's right. It gives you one really important bit of information, which is
Mhm.
the brown monkey is most vulnerable when the other one's screaming.
Hmm.
And you can get the other one to scream simply by attacking it first. And so that, along with the firecrackers, since firecrackers, are good against beasts, basically gives you enough of an opening just to completely destroy the brown one.
I just kept burning the brown one with the arm flame cannon.
The flame vent. At that point in time,
Yeah.
did you have the one that shot you backwards too?
Yes.
That's such a good prosthetic. Like,
Yeah.
if you had more spirit emblems, that would be so much more useful because it's also a great escape.
Did you
I
have
love-
the Titano, too?
What's the Titano?
The, where you cut yourself and you get more spirit emblems?
Oh yeah, I did.
Okay.
Man, every item in this game was fantastic, and the prosthetic tools in general, I think, were a really great twist on either what would have been trick weapons in Bloodborne or weapon arts in unique weapon arts in Dark Souls 3. And I know that technically weapon arts are more symbolized by the shinobi, or not the shinobi, but the combat arts. But just the variety and I guess the upgrade path for the prosthetic tools were so exciting. Every single one of them has a use and is really fun and interesting to blend into your combat. And then the shinobi arts that allow you to have follow-up sword attacks them and whatnot really gave a lot of flow to the combat that I enjoyed a lot. My only regret is that when I finally had the tools to get the Phoenix umbrella upgrade that allows you to or Suzaku's umbrella, I think is what it's called, that allows you to protect from flame. I decided not to do it because I wanted to upgrade to one of the lazulite options later on a different path of the tree, and then immediately had to fight the demon of hatred and felt like a fucking idiot for using the only resources I had at the time to fight the demon of hatred.
So how was that fight?
I fought that fight probably 15 times. The first I got his patterns don't change very much, and it's a lot more similar to a Dark Souls fight than many of the others, in which you want to be very close and stand near, and there's a lot more utility in dodging attacks than there is to blocking because of all of the fire buildup. The biggest thing is to coax out. It's to never try and run straight at him when there's a large gap, because he'll throw a fireball at you and that can take down half your health bar. And to coax the jumping attacks or the large round 2 and round 3 flame vertical lines, so you can grapple to him and cause damage on the grapple incoming, and then get a couple more sword swings in. But that was a fight that I think when I finally succeeded, I pretty much had to execute every deflection perfectly. And the only useful item for it was, you actually mentioned the
Malcontent.
the malcontent. But I actually only used that once in the fight. I used that wing. I forget what it's called, the Mist Raven. I used the Mist Raven item to dodge some of the perilous sweeping attacks and whatnot.
Damn, that was the one tool I'd never used.
It's actually really useful, but it's pretty hard to land. Deflections have a more forgiving timing in some instances, I think, than the Mist Feather Raven.
The
and then every
umbrella
time
is the best item.
Yeah, the umbrella has an incredibly permissive deflection option, but it also, I don't think I could have fought those purple spirits without the umbrella, because I got the shinobi art that allowed me to use the umbrella to charge up a like return attack that attacked like a really strong divine confetti strike. And so I used those pretty relentlessly against those restless spirits.
Those shaman spirits, whatever. Like I
thought they were impossible without the umbrella.
No,
Yeah,
they're not.
I was
I fought
getting-
them without them. All 3 of them.
And Tiff can attest to like how frustrated I got trying to face it without the purple umbrella. Like I was getting so pissed. And
Yeah, he got pretty upset fighting them without the umbrella.
I
They seem
tried all sorts
incredibly
of
unfair
things.
otherwise.
Like I used the whirlwind attack to get rid of the this, we'll call them spirit dot things, whatever.
The spirit bombs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are tough. The beam is the easiest to avoid, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But his like AoE standing underneath him, you just have to run away from. But at that point, he normally starts throwing the spirit bombs your way, and they have a very good tracking. Honestly, they track you
Well, as long
down.
as you just slash at them, it's fine.
Oh, I didn't know you could cut them.
As long as you have divine confetti, you can just cut at them and they disappear.
Did not know that.
So this is where like part of me wishes this wasn't a From Software game, because I think if it were any other designer or a developer rather, they would make the divine confetti or that sort of attack sort of weapon buff change be one that consumes off of like a bar of MP.
Yeah.
Like I hated the time constraints behind the divine confetti.
Yeah, I wish it was a bit longer.
It is
too.
very short. I fought them later in the game, so I had much higher attack damage than you could feasibly have if you fought them earlier. And it was pretty amazing, like how damage resilient they were, unless you used the divine confetti.
Mm-hmm.
Which, can we talk a little bit about the fact that this game is actually pretty non-linear there's obviously linear progress in it.
Oh yeah,
But-
there actually is a fair amount of areas that I've returned to way later in the game, and it was just because I missed them or thought that the access to it was like further ahead, and then never loop back around or something to access it. Lots of
It's
lots of
crazy.
locked doors that I just walked by thinking I'll get back to this later, and then never did. So went back and explored around some more.
And so it's crazy though, because like some of these bosses, like the one thing I disliked with that design is that I ended up facing some bosses when I definitely shouldn't have been fighting. Like the corrupted monk,
I'm the one that kind of
Ghostface.
led you there, though.
Still though, like the corrupted monk and Rin were both extremely difficult fights because I was like, I don't think I had beaten Genichiro at that point.
No, you hadn't.
Oh, that's pretty intense. I was in the Mist Village for the last item for the like incense. And so it was actually very easy damage wise.
So when I fought Rin,
Mhm.
the lady with the shamisen,
Mhm.
my strategy was, because I could not deal enough damage to her, I just guarded and deflected everything she had, and like it took maybe 20, like I'm not even joking in this time, like 20 minutes for that whole fight.
I'm pretty sure that's how you're supposed to fight her, unless you're extremely overpowered.
So she
You have
has
to parry her.
She has openings though, and I think that if you would deal even like, I think she's the type of enemy that if you took down 30% of her vitality, her stamina or her posture would not recover nearly as fast. Because I think what made the fight so long is that she would rest up just enough that like if I did not perfectly parry her next set of attacks, I would be losing progress. So a lot of it relied on the luck of me getting the attacks I knew how to perfectly deflect as opposed to parry.
Mhm.
And a lot of it relied on getting her to do the animation that would then lead to her sweep attack. Because if I didn't get that sometimes, I would not be able to deal enough posture damage through deflection. But then the corrupted monk afterwards, or at least the ghost form of it, that was such a hard fight because that was the type of enemy that you could not deal posture damage to reliably until it was weakened down.
Mhm.
and it was dealing too much posture damage to me, so I couldn't guard through a lot of his attacks.
And I am the exact opposite. I am in the same boat. I fought it before I beat Genichiro. I just skipped over and I was like, nah, I'm not fighting this right now. So I ran past her. And I fought the corrupted monk before Genichiro. And it was, since I play like a bitch, you just run around her. You have a huge area to do it.
Yeah.
So
The corrupted monk, though, has one of the most telling, like, her spin attack is such an easy way to build up posture damage, too.
I mean, I didn't reflect or deflect anything from her. I just hit her. And since you get the snap seeds, you can do like a third of her health or something with the snap seeds.
I didn't know that they did damage to her as an apparition, but that makes sense.
So you can take off a decent chunk of her health with that, and then you just, hit her, run, or with how I play.
What did you think about the second corrupted monk fight?
Fuck that one.
So much easier. That one was good. I like that one a lot.
I think I may have actually executed, I don't know if it's necessarily a cheese, but in the second stage where she has the like phantom or the shadow attacks, before she initiates it, if you're above her, you can just execute a death blow immediately.
That's technically a cheese, yes.
Okay, yeah.
You can do it for both first phase and second phase.
Oh, I didn't know you could do it for first phase, but it was essential for second phase.
So, all right, so I went into that fight knowing the cheese. I only got one death blow off, and it was at the start of the fight.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just didn't execute well enough to get the second death blow in. But so at that point, I basically forgot what the cheese strategy was. And I found that to be easier because she built up posture damage way faster. And since my strategy is mostly deflection based, like I deflect and I occasionally get one hit or two hits in. That boss was like literally right up my alley. And when the shadows come, I just ran to a cliff and found a spot where I would only be attacked from one angle, or like one rough like 100 degree, 120 degree angle, so I wouldn't have to change direction of my block. And then during like the final phase, it was still like a pretty intense fight because deflecting and only deflecting and finding small openings is like by nature a big gamble, because if you get hit at any point in time, there goes half of your health and now you need to retreat back.
You take a lot of damage in this game too. Like in almost every fight, I felt like it's roughly 3 to 4 like big hit strikes, and your health bar, no matter what stage of prayer beads you're at, is pretty much gone.
So I remember like it being a pretty tough, tense fight, and I got her down to like half of her health in her last bar, and Tiff's like, "Oh wait, don't you remember the fireworks and dust?
The third phase cheese."
Yeah, I mean, it technically works on all of them, but you just have enough at that point in time to just immediately stun lock it. So dust works so well against so many bosses, and this one in particular lets you have like
powder
I think,
one.
No, the like ashes.
Yeah, ashes. Sorry.
Oh man, I never used it.
It's so good. You can use it on basically every boss.
You just stun lock when you throw it, you hit it, and they're like, ugh.
It wakes up. You throw it again.
I thought that
you can get
I thought that you
or something.
threw the ashen powder so you could like hide again, and I was like, I was doing such a good job at hiding that whenever I was busted, there was normally only 1 or 2 enemies left, and I was like, okay, we're gonna duke it out. I'll have to take advantage of it for New Game Plus, because I will progress through New Game Plus and try and get the return ending, and because it is New Game Plus, it will be harder, and therefore
It will not be harder.
Yeah, I don't think it's harder.
Okay. The only thing I encountered is like the Genichiro fight, because I already knew those patterns. I just slapped him on, but I don't know. I guess maybe I'll use the Bell Demon so I can make it artificially harder.
And make sure you get rid of Kuro's charm then.
What's his charm? Does that prevent the demon?
No, that means you take chip damage, and what was the other thing?
I think that's the key component. There might be something else, but if you give him his charm back
At the beginning of the game,
you will take damage for guarded attacks. Deflected attacks you do not, but if you're just guarding, you take damage.
Oh.
I know it's not one I was looking forward to doing either.
Makes the game harder though.
So I just
Yeah,
kept
it
the
does.
charm.
I kept the charm because he seemed adamant about it. So I was like, okay.
He
I'll
was
keep it.
basically saying you don't want to have a bad time, man.
Yeah, and I was like, no, I guess I don't. Well, is there anything more to talk about just besides the fact that these are some incredibly fun boss fights?
You guys don't want to talk about Ishin?
Yeah, let's talk about Ishin.
Okay. I assume we're talking about
Final.
Sword Saint Ishin.
Yeah.
You guys had difficulty with what stage? The first stage?
Oh,
I
so
haven't
Tiff
fought
didn't,
him.
yeah. And like I did go into this fight blind
Mm-hmm.
to Tiffany's whatever. You can confirm it.
Hmm.
I had way more trouble in the Genichiro fight.
He died to Genichiro the first thing, like a
Like
couple
multiple
times.
times.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
I
and-
beat him the first time. He's
He's really easy to most people.
he's got a Makiri counter that you can coax being at the right distance, but at the start of the fight he has the same sweeping attack, and if you just get under it, you can get like 3 or 4 strikes in at the start. You never let him shoot the bow, and you always just gap close on him and make sure he doesn't sweep you.
I just like, I don't know what it was, but the first few times I fought him with the Mortal Blade, I let myself get hit by the Mortal Blade,
Which does a lot of damage.
Mhm.
which it, like just triggered me, and I got my ass kicked constantly. And so like, no, I think I died to him once, and I think the second time I fought the boss,
Mhm.
I got to Ishin, but I was like out of healing items.
Hmm.
And so the next number of tries were literally me just trying to get up, like trying to beat the first form of Ishin, which is literally him just being a fucking boss.
Hmm.
And it was just hard for me because I honestly don't know what makes it hard. If it's because I get greedy with openings,
Hmm.
but I end up using all of my healing items in the first phase of Ishin.
See, I think when he sheathes his blade and goes to execute the cross, every single time you just back up and then you punish him after he slashes. And
Right, I would do that. It's just, I don't know. Tiffany would probably have to point out what I was doing wrong in those fights.
Gotcha. It is tough though, because I perfected his like 3-step deflect that has a delay for each swing after the first. If you miss the second one, I think like sometimes you can deflect the second attack in that 3-step and that'll stop him early. But even if you deflect all 3, he sometimes doesn't have an opening. Like he's stopped the attack animation, but he immediately re-triggers his guard and you can't damage him. Like you can damage his posture some more, but you can get no vitality chip off of it. So I can see how that would be pretty difficult. And if you're not Makiri countering every time, I don't know how you build up posture as fast as I do.
So that was another thing too. I think I was having troubles telling some of his kanji attacks from each other, because he had 3, I think, in that form.
He has 2 stab attacks, and one of them he like sort of turns away from you on, and I never could catch the telegraph on that counter. But he has another stab attack that's easier to tell. But
Does he have a sweep as well?
He also has a sweep, and so I'd always take the stab where he actually turns away from you for a second as a sweep, and then get stabbed as I jumped.
Okay, so that must have been where my confusion was coming in, because I just stopped believing I could tell his tells.
Mhm.
Like I just immediately was like, I can't, like, because I would always guess the wrong route when he puts the sword back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like if it's any sign, like I didn't even realize that there was difference between those 3. So I just was always guessing wrong.
Yeah.
What's that?
Oh, I was gonna say the kanji is the same every time, right? For the devastation.
Yes.
Okay, I was gonna say if there's a difference, I could never read it. Like it was always I was too panicked when I saw the red to ever be able to tell a difference.
In Japan, it's much easier. One says thrust, one says sweep. No, but yeah. So that might have been the trouble that I had.
Yeah, it's his second phase for me. He just has a lot of, I think, false openings that I got caught on. Every time he jumped backwards with the spear and sweep, I just got crushed on. It got to the point where every time I thought he had an opening, I'd wait for him to jump backwards before I would start to attempt an attack.
Tiff, you watched me fight him from this point. So I died once once I got to Form 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first time I died was just maybe out of sheer spectacle, out of how badass he becomes.
You died once on the 3rd phase. You were on his last phase.
Oh, so I got through the 2nd phase, got to
Yeah.
the 3rd, and then died. Okay. But I honestly don't remember how I played this fight at all because I played it twice, right?
Yeah.
Up to that point.
Mhm.
So did I do a lot of attacking? I kind of
No,
feel like
you
I
just-
just deflected.
You just held up your guard.
Yeah. And honestly, the way that I beat the 3rd phase of that fight was a lot of lightning reversals.
Yep. Oh, yeah. That's I remember lightning reversals.
The lightning
And the
reversal
one
is
trick-
amazing, but it's kind of like as soon as you're able to read it, it feels like it's an unfair advantage that you get because it's a stun that does major damage. And
So the one trick though is that like I was doing lightning reversals and not dealing any retribution damage back. And I think it was
Yeah.
because the way the ground is built, if you're on the low ground, all you end up doing is hitting like the ground right below his feet.
yeah.
So
yep.
you have to get up on his ass like every time.
Yeah,
That was a good fight.
the terrain on that map was very frustrating at times. It definitely made it deceptive about how much distance he could close at moments, and also how your attacks would land, or like what your height was to some of his sweeps, or like he would have some attacks that if you were on the low ground, he was on the high ground, you're in just the right spot, it would go over your head. But then it could also clip through the ground and catch you if you were on higher ground, and it would confuse me quite a bit. But that fight was truly intense and wonderful, and I only spent probably 3.5 hours on it.
Neil only took like two tries to beat it, and it triggered me.
That's so insane. Yeah, I
And
can't
I think
believe that.
I made it worse because the entire time I'm just like, all right, what's coming up next? What's coming up next?
Yeah, he's like, this isn't the real boss. What's up next? This isn't the real boss.
Well, because I had so little faith in From Software ending the game correctly, which is you need to end the game on that fight. And I'm like, Ishin's going to become a fucking giant monster. That's what's going to happen.
No.
So like,
It was-
you kill him, and I'm thinking to myself, where's the sculptor's idol? I need more spirit emblems.
Yeah, it was a perfect fight. I have no complaints. It was very hard. I felt like it was honestly unfair at moments, and that's kind of the experience that I want out of the boss fights in this game.
If it just would have been phase 1 3 times,
That would have been terrible for me
I
and
would've
horrible for you.
I would have spent a shit ton of time on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I honestly feel like the hardest encounter in that game might have been one of the 7 spear guys, or the first general you face, because you're so foreign to all of the mechanics.
7 Spears was
talking-
super tough, and if the centipedes didn't have such like claustrophobic areas where the camera killed me, I could consider them like, I liked those fights, but because I died so many times because I couldn't see and I just had to essentially get the rhythm down, like I just didn't even look anymore. I waited because I'd have my camera clipping through a wall or something.
So I don't know if it was because I fought those guys a little early or what, because I did Senpo Temple earlier than I was supposed to as well, right? I got so triggered. I got so mad during those fights because if I didn't use firecrackers to disrupt one of their combos,
Mhm.
I would not have enough guard to get through another series of attacks.
Yikes.
So I like when I played it, I had to play it perfectly. The first encounter is, he does the 10 hit strike. If I don't perfect parry multiple hits after deflecting the 10th hit and getting the jump posture break on him, I would then have to use firecrackers, which consume 2 or 3 spirit emblems,
It's at
And
least
back
2,
up.
yeah.
and then back up and guard to restore my whole posture bar, because if I didn't, he would break my guard in the next combo.
Mhm.
But yeah, that camera angle was also the most frustrating thing, because as soon as I fought the next one with the same vitality stat and attack power, I don't think I died to it. I might have died to it once, but it wasn't.
I don't think you
nearly as
died to
bad.
the other centipede,
But
giraffe centipede.
But yeah, that first giraffe centipede, I think I probably died to like 7 times.
Mhm.
That camera angle. So this is a problem with the game, I think. The game takes into consideration the viewer or the camera in regards to the enemy as to whether or not you stay locked on, and not the protagonist and the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say if there's a big pillar separating you between Lady Butterfly, then that is perfectly fine. You lose your lock there because she's not in sight. And noted, by the way. Now, if you go to the other end of the hall and there's a big rock that's like blocking or obstructing your view as the camera, but not the protagonist's view of Lady Butterfly, it still dismisses your lock.
Yeah, that's very frustrating too, to lose the lock in that situation, because she can just descend from above, and it's hard to get that camera angle back on her.
Yeah,
especially with all the jumping.
But yeah, good game.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it a lot.
Honestly, my favorite that I've played out of From Software's lineup.
Mine too.
I'm in agreement. I honestly think having the ability to be defensive makes this game leaps and bounds better in terms of gameplay and feel.
And some animation canceling makes it better too.
I also just think that it made me feel like I had the most growth in my ability from start to finish, as opposed to growth in my stats.
Yep.
It also has the possibility of being the game of the year for me.
Me too. But Neil has to play Contrarian at the very least, so...
No, I mean, Resident Evil 2 would have been the other competitor.
Yeah.
And like, I don't have the same level of desire to go back to Resident Evil 2 as I do Sekiro.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of want to bring it back up and get through that second round again. That second playthrough. All right, I think that does it for this episode of Fancy Ramen. If you haven't already played Sekiro, what are you doing right now? Why are you listening to this?
Yeah.
You should go play it. And that about covers it. Emails can be sent to podcast@fancyramen.com.
Don't forget to like and review us on iTunes or whatever platform you stream or download our podcast from. And tell your friend twice to listen to the Fancy Ramen podcast.